Hey, this is Bobby Davis. It's a beautiful day here in North Carolina, and I have my producer here, Kevin Doyle, with us. We're still on lockdown this week. Hey, Kevin, how you doing?
Hey, good. How are you?
All right. So we do have our extra special guest here, Scott Hanselman, and let's just bring him on. Let's ask him a couple of
This is
questions here.
super cool.
Yeah. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Hey, Scott.
Hello. How's it going?
Hey, just want to thank you for your time today. We have a lot of people here in the Learn to Code market that are trying to figure out, is software right for me? And a lot of times at Coder Founder, we are pushing .NET as well because we think that's a perfect language to break into. Before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your origin story. Like, how did you get to Microsoft? And like, a lot of people look at Microsoft as Mount Olympus. So how did you get there, and what's your origin story?
Well, I mean, I don't personally think that working for Big Co is not Mount Olympus.
Right.
Frankly, I would think having a small business and doing a small consultancy would be Mount Olympus.
Okay.
One of the reasons that I went to big company, and I say that generically because big company is Microsoft, Google, Facebook, Apple, whatever, is healthcare. I'd love to have healthcare so I could open my own little consultancy or be a professor. And I was actually an adjunct professor at Portland Community College, and I also worked at Oregon Institute of Technology. So I did, software engineering at university before Microsoft. So I mean, I appreciate the compliment. And I appreciate the saying that Microsoft's a good thing. It's a great company, but I think that being able to make stuff and get paid for it and have healthcare is probably the better goal to have.
Okay.
But I actually went to Portland Community College at night, and I started in 1992, but I didn't graduate from college until 2003. So people don't know that I've been in software for 28 years, but I only graduated from, school a while, and it was all done at night, right? Mm-hmm. So the grind is the grind, you know what I mean? Whether it be at a boot camp or Coder Foundry, or if it's at Portland Community College. And I've actually got my associates in software engineering right there. And hang on, I think I've actually got. Yeah, here we go. I forgot. I found this a couple of days ago. Portland Community College Associates of Applied Science and Software Engineering. And this was done just because I wanted it. Like, you don't need this, you know what I mean? But I started it, and I was just like 2 credits a term for like years. And I was just like, kind of freaking finish this. And here's the thing. Once I got to the big company at Microsoft, they never cared.
Right.
They don't care if you have this or not. They want to know that you can do the work. So this gets you the interview, and then they never ask for it again.
Right. I agree with that. We tell that people every day that learning to code is probably what I call the economic mobilizer, where it opens you up to a world of opportunities, whether that be at Microsoft or running a small company. Like, I do run a consultancy, so I appreciate you think we're Mount Olympus over here. So like, we have like
like you can go to Macy's, which is great. If you work for Macy's, cool. But if you go to like a nice little boutique shop and somebody cool works there, and like they got their own thing, they got their own space, that's running a boutique is more fun, I think, than working for a big company.
All right, that's cool.
Well, that's another thing that's worth pointing out, actually, because working for a big company isn't working for 100,000 people. Microsoft's got 100,000 people worldwide, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. But what it really is it's 1,000 little companies of 100 people each. So you really need to learn how you can work with small teams. The .NET team's maybe 115 people total, all up. So I don't really talk to the other 99,000.
Right. Yeah. So we've had some questions in here about Xbox, and I think you're not in charge of the Xbox, so we're going to bypass those. So
no, we don't talk to them, and then we don't get any free discounts or anything either.
So let me ask you another question. Just tell us what your role is at Microsoft for people that don't know. What do you do out there?
So right now, I manage community for the developer division. So that means Visual Studio and .NET, and kind of managing community is kind of complicated. So I like to look at it as being, you've heard the term PM, right? A program manager.
Right.
So there's a thing called the PM discipline. Usually we think about like developers and testers, and then maybe architects, which are usually old developers that just work in Visio.
Right.
Program manager is basically the cat herder of programming, right? You're a project manager, you're managing the program. The program is like, what is it that we're doing exactly? And Microsoft puts it in the terms create clarity and generate energy. It's the what the F are we doing people.
Right.
So there's different flavors of program managers. There might be operations program managers that make sure that the product gets shipped out and that the CI/CD, the continuous integration and continuous deployment system and builds work. Then there can be the architects that are like, what's the 5-year plan? My team has largely been for a while the PMs of miscellaneous. So it's like all the other stuff that people forget, all the little knobs and whistles and stickers that need to put on the model at the very, very end. But recently we've been backing up and we think about ourselves as the PMs of the story arc. So from the moment you decide to Google with Bing, I want to learn C#, what did you find? Was it a good experience? Was it quality content? Did you go to docs? Did you go to videos? Did you go to YouTube? Okay, now you're starting to ramp up. Are you getting good samples? Are you having a nice experience? Are you seeing helpful videos? Okay, now you're in the product. Are the dialogues making sense? Okay, now you're writing your application. You're starting to put it into Azure, right? There's an arc of experience. You're searching for APIs and functions that you want to call. All right, now you're going to deploy it to a cloud somewhere. Are you having good experiences the whole way? And then my team tries to smooth that curve.
Okay, cool.
That makes sense?
And I would say that one of the releases that I have liked a lot in the recent weeks, I think the .NET Core page got redone, or they produced more documentation around that.
Sure.
Now, I was just going to give you kudos, is that the on-ramp for .NET Core is really, really kind of cool right now.
Yeah, actually, so my team owns that stuff. So if we look at there's docs, and you can go in here and say, oh, look, I want .NET, right? Or you can go and say, oh, I want to down, what is your intent, right? What is your goal? Your goal is to download .NET. Well, I want to make sure it's clear. So you notice how I'm on Windows and I click download .NET and it went, and Windows is ready to go. If I was on a Mac, they would have Mac right there. If I was on Linux, it would look different. Once I go in here and say I want to look at .NET, how quickly can I have success? Do I want a quick introduction? Do I want to download anything? Maybe I want a tutorial. This whole page was recently redone to try to make people more successful. And then this is the thing I'm the most proud of. This is the freaking .NET videos page. I love this. Right. Kendra and Leslie on the team here came up with this idea to basically do, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood .NET edition. And we just sit down and we go very, very gently through C#, the language that sits on .NET. Right. And we went through .NET and then .NET Core, and then the more advanced ones. We even have one we just added, actually, one that's really, really cool, which is working with a Raspberry Pi. So Sweeky here has a whole section on doing IoT, setting up Raspberry Pi, connecting the physical parts, and doing IoT, Internet of Things. And the whole goal here, of course, with IoT is see if you can get an LED to blink. Right. Okay. So all that's my team.
Right. Okay, cool. And that's another thing that we talk about a lot on the channel, if you can speak to that. A lot of times C# and .NET in general is they kind of pigeonhole it. And we talk to a lot of people around the world and coming in the boot camp. But talked about where you can run .NET, all the places that you can run .NET on now, .NET Core specifically. But not all of them, but you can just speak to it briefly. Yeah. So, okay, so here's the thing, right? .NET back in the day, 20 years ago, and a lot of the kids young people that are, who would be working with you were just getting born. Right. It was Windows. It was big and scary, and it was a thing that you would download and you would use to make business applications. Right. And about 5, 6, 7 years ago, we started to realize that, of course, the world's bigger than Windows. So what else can we do? Well, step 1, get it to work on a Mac. Step 2, get it to work on Linux. So now you've got Windows, Mac, and Linux. Now, once you've got a version of .NET that's open source, for the people, by the people, and it runs on Linux. When you say it runs on Linux, what does that mean, right? That means it's easily buildable with a Linux tool chain, meaning I can just go and get it and build it. Now, Mono was actually a community version of .NET that would run on Linux, and by such, it would work on many Linuxes, because there's lots of flavors of Linux. It can work on Ubuntu, it can work on OpenSUSE, right? It can work on Fedora. Once you get that, then you can start building it. You have a portable version of .NET.
Mono could run in the Nintendo Wii.
Mhm.
Unity, the game engine that runs on switches, uses Mono and uses C#. So things start getting portable once you start being able to build cleanly on Linux. And now you can build on, on Raspberry Pi, and you can like build a robot and have the robot like talk to the camera, and that becomes a thing. I've got Raspberry Pis that are managing temperature in my house, and those can run .NET. You can go and make video games with .NET and have them take input from control. So as soon as you get it onto Linux, you can run it anywhere. You can run .NET on an Apple Watch. I'm trying to think where you can't. Somebody got it running on Windows 3.1.
Wow, now that's impressive right there.
So there's all kinds of stuff. Like if you want to be successful, I've always said you got to learn JavaScript and a systems language. And a systems language is a language that lets you put together larger systems. Now, for some people, that might be JavaScript and JavaScript, but I believe in being a polyglot, right? Even though my Spanish is just Chipotle Spanish, it's nice to know English and Spanish, right? So it gives you an understanding of both. So if you learn JavaScript and .NET, you can build anything, anywhere.
Okay, cool. And I think that's real important, and that's what we're telling a lot of people. Even though at Coder Founder we primarily concentrate on web dev, we also are also building out Xamarin as well. So we're showing them the power of .NET by building Xamarin and web dev in the same bootcamp.
Yesterday, I went and picked up a package at UPS, and I mentioned that I was looking at the UPS app, and they told me that the UPS app was written in Xamarin.
Right.
So you're on your iPhone, and you're like, oh my God, I'm going to go to UPS. And then I'm like, oh, that's a C#? So you're bumping into this stuff all the time. You've got games on your Switch or your Xbox that have C# at their core, but you don't even see that. You don't think about that.
Right. And I know that even past Unity, Unreal Engine is also now has C# on the back end. And here in North Carolina, we're proud of Unreal Engine because it's kind of made in Raleigh. So like, we kind of tout it up. Anytime we get North Carolina credit, we try to give it out. So, but what about .NET 5? What's coming down the pipe for developers this year? Anything that you can announce? You want to break some news on Coder Foundry's channel?
Well, so that's a funny thing. People talk about breaking news with .NET, but the thing is, once you've moved everything to open source, everything that we're doing is kind of in public and out in the open. So there's not exactly anything I can tell you. There's no secrets anymore, right? The days of the secrets are over. But I can explain something that's interesting about .NET for people that might be interested. Okay. And let me see if I actually can grab something to show you, because here, how about, let me try something here. 1 second, it'll be worth it. What? So you said, what can you build, right? We can build everything. Right. That's cool. Blah, 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 marketing, blah, blah, blah. The thing that's interesting about .NET is this .NET standard. That's the thing, right? You know about the .NET standard, right? That's that idea that when you're targeting something, what are you targeting? Like, I'm going to write an app for Raspberry Pi. Okay, cool. That's great. You target the Raspberry Pi. I want to write an app for the Xbox. That's cool. But if you write a library, if you write a reusable piece of code, can you do that in a way that lets you use it anywhere? So the .NET standard says, hey, I'm going to say file.open, file.read, and I'm going to do it in the way that follows the standard. That means I can take that little library, standardize it, and I can use it anywhere. Okay? But there was a bit of a lie there, because .NET for a while was kind of complicated, and there were more than one .NET. Right. That's kind of a weird thing to say, like multiple .NETs, plural. You never hear people saying .NET plural. Well, the problem was that there was .NET on Windows, there was .NET on Mac, there's .NET on Mono, there's .NET Full Framework, .NET Core. It started getting complicated. So I would say that .NET 5 is going to attempt to unify these things, because you've got really, really mature, reliable .NET on Windows. It's called the .NET Framework. Right. You've got the new .NET Core, which has been out for a couple of years. And then you've got Mono, which is this great portable community version. So there's 3 .NETs. Now, you don't need to worry about any of this. You just learn C#, read the docs, you're going to have a great experience. But under the hood, it's a little confusing. It's almost like saying, well, you got gas cars and hybrid cars and electric cars. We need to unify all of that. So .NET 5 takes the best of all three of those .NETs. So if you imagine three parallel kind of tracks all trying to come together. So there'll be one .NET. And the reason that we're calling it .NET 5 is because 5 is a bigger number than 4.8.
Right, exactly.
You got .NET Core 3, right? You got .NET, I can't try to zoom in on that. You got .NET Framework 4.8, which is the one that's on Windows.
Right.
We just need one that's a bigger number, right?
Right.
The other thing that's interesting is when you're learning this stuff, and I'd be interested in what you think about this. You're teaching people to drive, right? You're teaching people. You say, "Here's your car. I want to teach you how to drive."
Right.
Do you want to be a person that sits in an Uber, goes from point A to point B? You don't really worry about the car. That's cool. Like that's great. Drive. Get in that Uber. Get from point A to point B. More power to you. But if the Uber breaks down, how much of a mechanic do you want to be? Now, my parents always said you should be able to change your oil and change your tire. That's as far as I can go, though. So when you're going through Coder Foundry, do you want to be a mechanic? Do you want to pop the hood and start taking the engine apart and reassemble it and put it back on the side of the road? Or do you want to be able to, check the oil and do that kind of thing? With .NET, there's a rabbit hole. You can go deep into the computer science of the thing. You can flip that hood open and you can see that. I always suggest try to be able to change your oil and check your tires. And with .NET, that means understanding when something in .NET, when some code in C# does a thing, opens a file.
Right.
Well, who actually opened the file? Like, was it Linux? Was it Windows? Did .NET do it? Like, how exactly does that work? I'm not saying to be a low-level plumber, but just know one level underneath than your coworkers.
Right.
Does that make sense? Because otherwise you're just going to go and ask. And the reason I'm explaining this idea of the three .NETs combining, you don't need to know that.
Right.
But that's changing a tire, changing your oil type information that you might find helpful when your Uber breaks down.
Yeah. And I think that what we try to do is teach them how to start building things and learning how the basics of code, and then explaining like there is a larger world. But I want to
bingo.
A lot of people, when we talk to a lot of students, they're trying to learn. Like we talked to a guy yesterday, put a comment on here that he's looking at 9 languages this week and he's a beginner coder. And we keep telling him, like, just learn, why don't you just focus in on one thing, or what we call one stack, which is like learn how to build a website, then move into mobile, then move into desktop, or start with desktop. But it sounds like desktop too has moved very far along where now we can release desktop for Mac and Linux easily now.
Well, because that's an interesting technical question. Like, how does something work on desktop?
Right.
And you can get into really interesting technical conversations about this stuff. You want to put a button on a screen, react to a click, and paint some stuff. How hard can that be?
Right.
Right. Well, it depends on what you laid your page out with. Let's say you used WinForms. WinForms is the most popular way to do stuff. Well, it's WinForms, Windows Forms.
Right.
Who drew the button? Did C# draw the button? No, C# asked Windows to draw the button. Well, what function did that? Well, it's a Windows function. Now I want to make an app that does a UI and puts a button on the screen on a Mac. Those button commands aren't there, right? I got to do the Mackie thing.
Right.
So if you're just a new programmer, you can imagine, well, if I'm on Windows, do Windows stuff. If I'm on Mac, do Mac stuff. But that's really messy and complicated. And that's why applications that use Electron, right, are so popular, because it's a web browser in a frame. So I think everybody's trying to crack the same problem that Java tried to crack in the mid-90s, which is called write once, run anywhere, right? And the fundamental issue is, do you paint everything yourself from scratch and you draw the button with pixels?
Right.
Which is hard because it'll just make your app look weird everywhere.
Right.
Right. Or do you do the thing that we all try to do, which is like have the operating system draw the button? But if you remember a couple of years back, maybe 10 years ago, when Office came out on Mac, and it looked weird.
Yeah.
Because it looked like Windows on a Mac. Ultimately, if you want your apps to look awesome everywhere, look native everywhere,
Right.
they need to basically have the UI part written separately.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really believe in write once, run everywhere. I think it's a mistake. Slack looks like Slack everywhere. Teams looks like Teams everywhere. I think that's kind of weird. I think it's more fun to say, of the pie chart of the work that your application does, about 10 or 15% is your UI, and the rest of it's all internal. Write that part to the .NET standard. Just write good old C# that runs anywhere, that doesn't have any buttons or any UI.
Mm-hmm.
That's 85%. Then have all of your UI and have your Windows UI and your Mac UI and your whatever UI. That's one way to do it.
Yeah, and you see that a lot in Xamarin. So like Xamarin does that. They actually do both. They have forms, which
Xamarin's very good at that.
But Xamarin, you can write specific Android interfaces, which we're doing on a project right now where it's all Android.
And that's a great way to do it, because you're basically lighting up. If the phone that you get the new Pixel or the new iPhone has got some new thing, you can do that. You can basically write it once, 85-90% of your code's combined, right? And then you say, oh, hang on, are you in a Pixel? Oh, Pixel's got a whatever gyroscope,
right?
And then you if it's called if defing, right? You can if def your way to glory, which is saying, if I'm on a Pixel, do some Pixel stuff.
Right, and you see that a lot in Xamarin too. So like that's kind of cool. Do you want to answer some questions from the crowd? Are you open for that?
I love the people. Oh, I love that. I didn't even know there was a button for that.
Yeah. So
there's a live comments button. Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
I'm gonna add myself back in here so I can.
Kevin will read the question to us.
Let's go back and see if there's some controversial questions here.
Okay.
I'm just looking now. Let's see what we have. I like so .NET 5, the Tesla truck. That's interesting.
So .NET 5 equals a Tesla truck. So I'm curious, Chris, if you
.NET 5 equals a Tesla truck. Okay, so that's a funny one, because someone's trying to kind of troll, low-key troll, but it's actually a great troll.
Yeah.
The Tesla truck, when we all saw it, I think we all can agree, we were just like, there's no way this is going to happen. That is the weirdest looking, funky thing. Why would they make it look like that? That is stupid. We all agree the Cybertruck is insane. But I think we can also agree that after about 3 or 4 sleeps, a couple of days later, you're kind of like,
we all put $100 down. It's what happened.
Well, I don't know about you. I don't have that kind of money. But the Tesla truck was the kombucha of electric trucks, where it's just like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. .NET 5 is the same kind of thing. There's a reason for those angles. There's a reason that they do what they're doing. And the idea is a unified .NET that's going to work great on Windows, going to be reliable, but also works anywhere else, is a good idea.
Okay. So we got Simon here. Read that one, Kevin.
Yes, I was asking someone looking to learn .NET Web Development, should they start with JavaScript before focusing on C#?
So a friend of mine, I was teaching computer science to, said, why do you teach me low-level stuff? And by low-level, I was like, let's learn about memory management. Let's learn about bytes and bits. And blah, 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 blah. And then I realized that I had learned computers from the metal up. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, you want to make a website? Want to make a great game? Let's talk about memory management in the processor. And we were down here, right? That's a cultural thing. I'm a person of a certain age. So that's how we did things. We learned at the metal up. But most people today don't. They learn from the screen down to the metal. Mm-hmm. So there's this mountain that you're trying to go through. Which side do you want to go from? Do you want to learn JavaScript because you like UIs and buttons and you want to go and have that experience? Does low level to you mean pressing F12 tools in Chrome and that's fun? Mm-hmm. Then start at the front end and go down to the back end. But if you don't have any skill or interest in UI, then go from the other direction. Just make sure that whether you're going from the screen down to the metal or the metal up to the screen, that you know that you're going to pass somebody in the middle of that in that experience. So I had realized I had been teaching someone without really being conscious of my own kind of cultural bias. It's a way of gatekeeping a little bit, mm-hmm. where it's like, hey, let me talk to you about memory management. And in college, they would go and say, hey, can I learn Java? And they go, no, we're going to teach you C. We're going to make you suffer. We're going to make you manage your own memory. And then at the end of that semester, we're going to say, just kidding. Garbage collection. You don't worry about memory, right?
Right.
Teach people the way they want. So to the gentleman's question about JavaScript versus C#, doesn't matter. Pick one and then learn the other one.
Exactly.
Who am I to say learn Spanish before English or learn English before Spanish? Learn them both. Doesn't matter which one you pick first.
Okay, cool. All right.
There
You
you
got
go.
any controversial ones?
I don't know. Is this controversial? I don't know. Love .NET Core, but you're still using jQuery as the future version, moving to vanilla.
I'm not sure how .NET Core and jQuery are related. If you can use jQuery if you want to, but .NET Core doesn't have any particular affinity or relationship with jQuery. You don't have to use jQuery. So .NET Core is not related to jQuery in any way.
Yeah.
If you want to, Jerry, coding with Jerry, if you want to clarify that question, I can understand more what you mean there. But no, Visual Studio has templates that use jQuery. We also have ones that use Knockout, but there's no requirement anywhere in .NET to use.
Right.
That's probably the point. I bet you it's because it's in Visual Studio.
That's the
probably
template
why.
coming in.
Yeah, it's very possible.
I bet you that's the point of that question. Here you go. I've seen a lot of stacks like mean and MERN stacks, but are there any popular stacks with .NET?
Are there any popular stacks with cool names and fun acronyms? Right? So when people have like lean and mean and lamp and WAMP and all that kind of stuff, whatever. The thing about .NET is that .NET acknowledges that reality is a hybrid. So if you want to use .NET with PostgreSQL or MS SQL or SQLite, there's nothing in there that prevents you from doing that. If you want to use Mongo, that's cool. I think the problem in quotes is that you're looking for a prescription. Do it this way. And here's a cool acronym. .NET, I would say, is probably not super good about prescribing things. We're almost too flexible. It's like I've got some very friendly, some very nice Jewish friends that may have lapsed a little bit. And it's like, don't eat pork. But if you do, here are some lovely recipes. And that's kind of like .NET, where we're not going to go and tell you, here's the thing to do. So it's not as prescriptive. It's really like, hey, we just want you to be happy. I want to make sure everything works well. So yeah, are there stacks? There absolutely are. But are there ones that I'm going to throw at you? Not particularly. It is worth showing that there is a stack in the F# space that's called the SAFE stack, if you like cool acronyms, SAFE, which is F#, and it is called, SAFE stands for Saturn, Azure, Fable, and Elmish. So yes, there's always a stack out there with a cool acronym, but no, I don't have any for you for .NET.
And we tell people all the time that we teach in the Code Found here, it's a lot of Razor pages. I
love Razor pages. My podcast and my blog are all Razor pages.
Yeah. And then we show them how you would hook up vanilla jQuery or vanilla JavaScript to call backend services from the front. But that leads you down. You could use React, you could use Vue, you could use a lot of things. We just want to show you kind of, here's the pattern, pick the library or the front end language that you want, and that's some flavor of JavaScript somewhere right now currently, or TypeScript.
Sure.
Let me ask you another question. I'm interested in this. What's your thoughts on Blaser and adoption, and where do you think of that? Yeah, someone just asked the future of Blaser.
Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah.
Mr. McMiller, will Blaser make JavaScript obsolete? Okay, so let's think about this. When someone builds something new on top of a previous thing, what they're doing is they're hiding it, right? If I write a function, do it, and I call the function the do it function, and it hides 6 other functions. Did the do it function make the other 5 that it calls obsolete? Blaser can't exist, right, without WebAssembly and JavaScript in the engine there. So it's more that Blaser is a layer of abstraction on top of JavaScript. Netflix is a layer of abstraction on top of your television. Has Netflix made live television obsolete? Kinda, but live television is still a thing. Did the Kindle destroy the printed page? Remember how everyone was like, this is it. The Kindle's here. It's over for books, right? Has Amazon killed a lot of small bookstores? Yes. Has it killed them all? No. I think we're clear that JavaScript's going nowhere. I think rather than thinking about it in terms of will Blaser make JavaScript obsolete, I think Blaser will make JavaScript more powerful, more accessible, more friendly. To the original questions about 3 questions ago, when someone said, should I learn C# or JavaScript? Here's an opportunity for someone to learn C# first, have the flexibility and have the portability of JavaScript, and they can get to JavaScript later. So I would think Blaser makes JavaScript more accessible by making it available to C# people, by making the browser as a target. But I don't see a world where one, kills the other. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Larry is asking, where's my podcast and my blog? You go and search for Scott. I am in an epic battle right now on the internet with Scott brand toilet paper. And you go and we Google.
You're going to lose that one at the minute.
I know, it's killing me. They're just evil. If we go and search for Scott, they put a freaking restricted trademark by it. And you used to be able to find me, the Scott paper towels and all these Scotts. And I'm like, oh my God. I used to be on the first page. Now you're digging for me. Sometimes on page 2, sometimes page 3. It's just scandalous. It's just awful.
They buried you.
No, I know, it's bad. It's just a nightmare. But you can check me out at Hanselman.com, Scott Hanselman. You remember that by Hansel and Gretel. And then my podcast, I've got a number of podcasts. The one that I'm known for is called Hansel Minutes. I've also got an older show called This Developer's Life. I've got a cloud show called Azure Friday. And I did a pop culture show for a while called Ratchet and the Geek. On Hansel Minutes, I'm very proud of this show because I have done over 730 episodes.
Wow.
And it is just a lovely group of faces of people that I've had on the show over the last almost 14 years. Every Thursday, years and years and years. Notice how I'm having no trouble finding cool guests.
Right.
So I would really encourage you, if you're getting into technology, to check out my podcast. I'm extremely proud of it. So check that out.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I love your recent stuff, by the way, on working from home. Couldn't be any more useful at this point in time.
Thank you, sir.
We've all been setting up these, right? Home places. You've been doing this for a while, so it's been good learning from somebody who's figured it out already.
Well, one thing I want to point out also, when and I'm interested in what the folks on YouTube think about this. Yeah. When you come in here and you find a bunch of people on a thing, and in this case here, we got a bunch of dudes of a certain age with cool stuff behind them. You got a nice shelf, and you got like a TIE fighter up there, and you look into people's worlds, and you're like, oh man, look at all their cool stuff. This may look like $1 million, what's behind me here. This is a spare bedroom. I got some chocolate paint, so it's painted cool. I built this arcade from scratch. It cost me about $50. I found it at a bar. I painted it black and I put a PC in it. These are Billy shelves from IKEA. These are LED strip lights, and this is Legos. Like, this looks like money. There's maybe $300 in this room. This is not
right
$1 million studio. So I don't want anyone to ever look at my space or your space or Kevin's space and then feel bad about their space, because this is just a bunch of crap in a room with like some action figures on the wall. You should make your own space.
Mine too. I'm in a little attic, and I agree. Yeah, it's become more accessible. We can up our quality now at home. I liked your video using a DSLR or Micro Four Thirds.
Well, so look at the quality. So here's me. Look how pretty I am. Here's me with the light off. Right? It's just a YouTuber makeup light. That was $15. Never pay retail.
Yep. Right. That's kind of cool. So yeah, we're Kevin's in production, and so are we. So we're camera geeks. So we like cameras and things like that. We think it's funny that you can't buy a webcam right now. So like, it doesn't matter.
I don't think that's funny at all. I think that's horrible.
You just can't get one.
But here's my pro tip, Scott. If you have money, the new webcam out is from Blackmagic Design, the Pocket Cinema. That's you can buy that now.
Pocket Cinema
from Blackmagic Design. So that's the pro
it's
camera.
Overkill of the webcam. I would say.
Now it's a webcam. It's a $1,200 webcam. So.
Okay, you lost me at $1,200. I bought this camera on Craigslist, so I'm never gonna do that.
So
Katie points out that Legos are more expensive than Billy bookcases, and I will say touche. But I've got a 12-year-old and a 14-year-old, so we just kind of collect them and inherit Legos over over time.
Yeah.
But that's a very, very,
awesome.
very, very good point, Katie.
These are Legos back here too, and they get expensive.
Yeah, I've actually got a bunch of crap too on my. I've got like all my action figures.
Oh, nice.
And stuff here.
Oh, you won Bobby at Destiny.
Yeah, you did. Yes, I'm a huge Destiny fan. I've spent entirely too many hours playing Destiny, so I should code more and play Destiny less. So, you have to reconsider life when you're playing that much Destiny. So that's what I'm currently doing. So kind of cool.
Oh, here's a question here. Troy is saying, is Pluralsight the best and most affordable learning option that can take you to an advanced .NET developer? I think that there is enough material that is free on the internet to take you there. So I don't think you need to pay. Pluralsight's great, right? Pluralsight is the Netflix of programming, but I don't think it's necessary. I would again point back to my own .NET videos that we put at .NET/videos. So all of these videos here will get you to the beginner and 200 level. Then we start getting into the more advanced stuff, and the docs are incredibly advanced. So here's advanced C# right here, walking through link and asynchronous task composition. I mean, this is all free, right? So I love Pluralsight, and if it makes you happy and if it feeds your spirit, sure, absolutely. It's a good investment, but no, I don't think you need to do that. There's a lot of great free resources available online, and a great community to teach you this stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And then one note is, I think Pluralsight is free this month, but you got to just check that out. And
oh, is it? Pluralsight's free now? Well, then you should stop watching this stream immediately.
Get to work learning.
So COVID is they've put something out there for free for now. So
cool.
Yeah, it's super good.
I don't know how long it'll last, but so maybe it's a time to check it out for 30 days.
There's also a lot of good stuff on Udemy as well. A lot of the courses on there. And you're talking about most of the times when it's on sale, it's $12. Like, it's not free, but it's close.
You know who is a great, what's his name? Let me find this. There's a great teacher of C#. He's on lynda.com. So many good C# teachers out there. Lynda.com is Lynda, and then LinkedIn Learning is another great one. Reynold Adolphe. Oh, this guy's great. Let me show you this gentleman, Adolphe. He has got some great stuff, and he does a thing called C# comedy, and he's been doing C# and there you go, .NET stacks. Here we go. So he's a teacher, and he did some classes. Oops. There we go. C# best practices for developers, ASP.NET Core. This is a great one here on nailing a C# developer interview. It's a couple years old, but he basically walks you through when you do the interview for a programming job for C#, how to get started. So I definitely like Reynold Adolphe's stuff.
That's cool. And we talk about that a lot. We talk about interviewing.
Right.
Obviously, part of the boot camp here too is talking about securing an interview and how to handle that. You know,
here's the thing. They make interviews sometimes trivia tests, and they try to make you all stressed out. And I reject that. I'm interested in if you can think. Right. So a couple of interesting interview questions that I have asked before. I'd be interested in what the folks on the comments think. Excuse me. One is, you go into a web browser, you type google.com, you hit enter. What happens? It's not a trivia question. It's a what do you think happens? And then people will go, a web page comes up. And you go, yeah, but what happened? Well, I mean, you made an HTTP call to Google. Okay, but what happened? You know, you keep asking. Well, I mean, when you type Google, it looked up the IP address. Like, now we're talking, right? One time I had a person literally say, well, you push the key, and then the metal of the, touch the contact, the metal contact of the key touched, and electrons jumped in. And I was like, whoa, I was just asking about what happened on the web browser. And he's like, the quantum state and the levels of the quarks electrons. And it's like, that's pretty cool. But what was neat was it showed how that person's brain worked, because that's all true. Like that, a bunch of really cool stuff with physics and electrons happen, right? So why not think about asking people questions about how they think, rather than questions that are trivia about, like, did you memorize this? You can't work for me. You didn't memorize that thing.
Right.
Oh, actually, here's the thing, folks in the YouTube can help me with. I've been recently putting together a YouTube series called Computer Stuff They Didn't Teach You. I've only done 3, but right here, these are things you didn't teach you. So like, what's a carriage? Oh, what are you doing, Kevin?
Sorry.
What are you doing, man?
There we go.
I'm
messing you up. Go ahead. No, I like this series. This is good.
So this one is called Computer Stuff They Didn't Teach You, where you talk about carriage return line feed, and I go through and talk about ASCII and what ASCII is, and we go and look at like hex and all kind of stuff. And I think it's really funny because we talk about carriage returns and line feeds, and no one ever explains what a carriage is and why is it returning, right? So it might be interesting for people to tell me what they would want to learn about if I were to put together more computer stuff they didn't teach you.
Okay. I'm sure we can get some questions on that one.
Definitely. Drop it in the comments. We would love to see that. Yeah, I did watch one of your videos on that. It's super interesting. It's stuff that you really don't think about, and you're like, why is that called that?
Well, and this is an important thing, right? So back to the interview question, you don't need to know this stuff, but isn't it fun to know this stuff?
Right.
Right? It's just a little trivia about life that just like, oh, this is fun. Why is it 2020 and we're still thinking about carriage returns and line feeds, which are just control characters to tell typewriters what to do? If I learn Git, I need to know about CRLF, and I haven't touched a typewriter in 30 years.
Right. You may never have seen one before if you're under 20.
Maybe, or know what one is.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you another question. How do you think about, what's your view on like whiteboard challenges and things like that? I always felt like that was counterintuitive. Like, you don't code on a whiteboard, you code with an IDE. And I just didn't think they were actually fair tests.
I want to know how someone thinks. I think that a whiteboard challenge is only useful if that person is being hired to stand in front of a whiteboard with their team and whiteboard a lot.
Right.
If you're interviewing and the person who is putting you through the gauntlet is having you do stuff that isn't stuff that you will actually do in your job, I would encourage you to try to push back gently. Right. Hey, can you do a bubble sort? Oh, we do a lot of bubble sorts here at the company. Exactly. It's just like, what can you do to just, is this what I'll be doing? At Microsoft, we've changed our interview process in the developer division lately, where we really focus on giving a person a legitimate problem and having them work with actual people to solve that problem. Okay. Right? So we'll go and we'll say, like, here's the thing we're working on. What do you think? And we'll collaborate, we'll talk. Yes, there are whiteboards, but only when it's in fact time to use a whiteboard, right? Exactly. Like that's how it is. Like, so make them do stuff that they would be doing in their regular life. And Googling for stuff and going on Stack Overflow is a thing that you would be doing. Right.
I think Google, when we test programmers coming into Cortex, we set up something and allow them to use any tool that they have to finish the problem. So if I want you to fix this MVC website, you can Google, you can do whatever you want, because that's kind of how the job works. Asking them to do it from memory is just kind of weird, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't remember that stuff. I remember all kinds of random stuff.
Right. Okay. Got any other questions, Kevin? What do we got?
Get a couple of suggestions for your thing here, Scott. Teaching the history of the bug is kind of interesting. I always found that was cool.
Okay.
Oh yeah, the history of a bug. That's a thing. But see, and then here, Andres Perez is saying the history of the floppy disk and stuff like that. We have to make sure that learning history doesn't necessarily want to prevent young people from doing well in an interview. It's more about historical context. I'm not interested in historical trivia. It's like, oh, well, why is this? the power of a person who is early in career, and the folks that are maybe here or maybe earlier in career or just getting started on their career, your power, your superpower is that you are unsullied, right? You haven't got any hang-ups about stuff. You don't have 30 years of, like architectures and stuff. You're fresh. So your job is to push back on people like me and go, are you sure you need to do that? Can't you just keep poking at the problem? And then I'll go, well, but historically, and you're like, yeah, but why not look to the future? So, there needs to be diversity in age as well, where someone is challenging me and older people on our hangups.
Right.
And I don't care whether the floppy disks were a thing, but don't let the old person on your team be like, yeah, when I was a boy, old man shakes fist at cloud. So Jack is saying something really very strong here, and let's talk about that. You're telling us how interviews shouldn't be conducted, but you have no control over that. That is true, and it is very difficult. You're also in a difficult position because the problem is you come into an interview and you are at a disadvantage. You are down here, and you can try to tell them that you don't want it, but really the only way you can get out of it is by voting with your feet. And we're in a really tough situation where you need the freaking job. So it's a dance. You want the job, you need money, but at the same time, you don't necessarily want to be treated like that. But you're not always in a place of privilege where you can tell them this is not cool, and you can't change that power dynamic. So I think Jack is making a very, very valid point. The thing is, though, if the interview sucks, the job will also suck.
Right.
So I would say that the way we can get around this, the way that we can solve this, and I'm interested in what Jack thinks about this, is to try to get as many interviews as possible. Because there's two steps: get seen and get the interview, and then get into the interview and try to make change, right? Try to get. Right. So the only way you can have a better interview is to do it 20 times. Get every freaking interview you can get, and then pick the one that sucks the least.
Right.
And I think that was a very challenging question, and I appreciate that from Jack.
Yeah, I like what he's thinking, Jack. The one thing I would say too is, like, a lot of times when we read on internet, we're talking about the Google interview process. A lot of people say you have to know this. When you go to like random company down the street, typically they're saying, hey, can you build this? It's like I've been to like complete for interviewing technically where there's softball interviews, and a lot of the companies are like that. They just need someone that come in and do it. And that's where we think a portfolio brings, if you could bring in some work that you've done and you can show that to them, you can bypass a whiteboard interview. I mean,
that is an incredibly valid thing. I saw a tweet recently that said that they had 52 early in career people up for a job. Not one had a portfolio site or website.
Right.
So again, everyone's gatekeeping, everyone's doing different kinds of gatekeeping. And I apologize that there are people out there that are putting in hurdles for you to jump over. But if the goal is over here, the goal is a job working on a public facing website, doing cool development or a game or whatever, and you're over here, the number one thing you can do to me to at least get me like, oh, this person knows some stuff. If you can afford it, register a domain, put up a website, code it from scratch, put stuff you did on the website, even if it's just projects you did on CodePen, I don't care. And show me that you can register a domain, connect it to a website, get a running web server up. That is your living, breathing portfolio. That will put you in the top 5% of all people on the internet that are doing stuff. It sounds simple, but you should be listening to this going, well, I had a website, but yes, it's hard to maintain and manage a website. That's the point, right? If it was easy, we'd all just use Squarespace.
Right.
And if you can do that, you're sending a message that you're serious. And that's a great, do you agree, Bobby?
Yeah, you're like, I'm nodding my head because we preach that.
Sharon says he's been coding Foundry for 2 weeks. He's already got a portfolio site.
Yes.
So you're teaching him.
Yeah, that's
Good
what
job.
we're doing.
I appreciate you. I'm going to go and Google for that right now.
Yeah, the other thing that we do is we also say that GitHub is not enough. And like if you have it in a repo and you have your JavaScript projects in a repo, you're asking the hiring manager to like clone that, get rid of the dependencies, get it running to see if it works. And even if someone's highly technical, they're going to look at it and go, I don't have time to do that. Can you just give me a URL I can click on? And so every Coder Founder student has to publish a portfolio by the end of the cohorts here at the end of 12 weeks. Mm-hmm. That's cool. You got any other questions, Kevin?
Really interesting question. What is the future? What do I think the future holds for women in coding? It is important to point out that we are 3 white dudes of a certain age on a YouTube right now.
Yeah.
I appreciate you, but every time you show up and there's 3 of us, I'm like, this is about where there's too many, right? Technology is supposed to look like the mall. Now I know we've forgotten what the mall looks like, but you go to the mall and there's this wash of people from all over, all shapes, sizes, and colors, right? And then you go to a meeting and they're not. If you can make technology look like the mall, that means a representative group of people, representative meaning it needs to look like America, then you have done a good job. So I hope that the future is one that is full of good-looking faces, right? This is 730 episodes of my podcast, and I'm scrolling through it, and I have had no problem finding amazing qualified women and people of color. It is not a pipeline issue. It's an opportunity issue. So hopefully, I'm still going. I'm still scrolling. Keep in mind, I could do this for years. It is hopefully a bright future. That's a great question.
Right. I learned a hard lesson too. I was in a podcast one time, and the CEO of JewelBots back in the day was there.
Sarah Chips.
Yeah, and we were sitting there talking, and I come in, and I'm perfectly admitting that the way I think sometimes. I run a boot camp, I run a consulting company, and sometimes you can suffer from smartest guy in the room syndrome. And I'm sitting there talking, and we're just talking about stuff, and I had no idea who this lady was. And she shows me.
You didn't know who Sarah Chips is?
At the time, I didn't. I do now.
She works at Stack Overflow. Sarah Chips did JuliaBot, and she's on the foundation, the board of the .NET Foundation.
Right.
She's like legit.
Yeah, she's super legit. And I didn't know who she was at the time. And I'm looking at JewelBots, and I'm thinking, in my mind, I was thinking, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I would never, ever, ever do that. And then she said, in the podcast, she says, it's in Target. And I'm like, oh, okay. So,
and this is really important, right? So you were like, this is dumb. This is not for me. When we, people of a certain age and certain flavor, say X isn't for me, it's a natural feeling. It's like, I look at this Cyber truck and I go, that ain't for me.
Right.
But it's for somebody.
Right.
And that's where we have to apply extreme empathy. And I know that you do this in the way that you run Coding Foundry, is you go, just because it ain't for me doesn't mean it's not for 80% of everybody else, right? JuliaBots is freaking amazing. Guy on my team, John Galloway's daughter, 11-year-old daughter, got so into JuliaBots that she actually gave her own conference talk. She gave a talk at a conference and live coded, 11-year-old girl, live coding on stage in front of 1,000 developers for JuliaBots. Not my thing, but it's freaking her thing, and I think that is awesome.
And I do too. And like what I admitted in the podcast was I admitted to her and I said, you know what, I didn't think that was a big thing. And then I realized something, and I learned this lesson. I've carried it forward every day since, is that when you bring different voices in the room from different backgrounds, you get better solutions. And not in a million years would I thought of JewelBots. You could put me in a room by myself forever. I would never thought of it.
Exactly. And when you're in a room, you need veterans, you need older people, you need disabled people, right? You need people with invisible disabilities. The more interesting people, the more, again, technology looks like the mall, the more the people are going to come up with ideas you never would have thought of. Because if everybody in the room went to Stanford, then everybody's going to come up with a Stanford answer.
Right. So that's kind of cool. We got any more questions, Kevin? We're running up against the hour.
Well, I got to get going, so let's maybe do one more.
One more for the road.
If folks can check me out on the Twitter, okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're a great Twitter follow too.
Yeah, it's a great follow.
Good stuff on Twitter. I like that stuff. Let me see here.
La,
We
la,
have
la.
a portfolio question.
Okay, David.
David joined us all week, so we'll give David a chance to put his thing on here. We've been doing this all week, and
When I apply for a job with a working portfolio and I make a blog, absolutely. So yeah, if you made anything, here's the thing: make a portfolio, make a blog. That's cool. What is it you're into? Make a thing for that. If you want to make a website for your church, make a website for your church. If you want to make a website for your niece and nephew's Girl Scouts group, or your friends' kids' Little League, or your HOA, or your freaking D&D group, make a thing and tell everyone about that thing. Absolutely. So yeah, it isn't necessarily about having a portfolio, David, with a blog. It's about making a thing and then making it so I can go and Google for you, find your site, and click on one click on the thing you made. So yeah, make a blog. That's great. If you want to run WordPress, that's cool too. But if you want to make a blog and write it from scratch because it feeds your spirit, then do that. My blog is written from scratch. It's called Das Blog, D-A-S blog. It's German for the blog. And me and my buddy Mark work on it, and it works great because we enjoy writing that. But if writing a blog doesn't get you jazzed, then write a whatever, D&D gaming board generator or whatever, a Fortnite map editor. Doesn't matter. But yes, making stuff will always put you ahead of people who didn't make stuff.
All right, cool.
100%.
That's awesome
This is
advice.
good stuff. You have a good crowd here, Bobby.
All right, well, thank you. I just want to thank you for your time, Scott, and appreciate coming on the show. And please follow him at S Hanselman. Check his blog out. We'll put all the links down there for his blog and his YouTube channel as well. And
people love the shirt, by the way, too.
They love the shirt. We'll code for tacos.
So everywhere you can find me is S Hanselman on Twitter. You can check me out also. I love it if you got to my YouTube. I've been putting a lot of content on my YouTube since I'm trapped in my house. I have anything else to do.
Right. All right.
Cool.
Well, Scott, we'll let you go. We know you got stuff to do at Microsoft, and we appreciate the time. And stay healthy, my friend.
All right. You too. See y'all.
All right. See you.
Thank you so much.